this refresh course is that the blended finance mechanism for scaling climate resilient infrastructure in emerging economies. So before getting into the detail, so what exactly is the blended finance? How it is powerful to bridge the gap. The blended finance is a strategic approach that that combines development finance or philanthropic funds with the private capital to reduce investment risk, attract private investors to projects that would otherwise be considered too risky. So, as you all know that there are two kind of concepts in macroeconomics. When a person is going to have an investment, there are two kind of investments. One is autonomous investment. The other one is induced investment. So, as all of you guys know that the public sector or a government investment comes under the autonomous investments, where without any kind of returns or anticipated returns, so the government will spend. But in case of private investments or individual investments, it is influenced by the kind of returns as well as the kind of risk that they are going to take. So I think when the private investors, when they are going to invest, obviously there might be a risk involved in that. But so if you reduce the risk, there will be more attraction for the private investors to invest in sustainable development oriented projects. So like that, so there is essentially the public concessional funds act as a catalyst and absorbing first losses, providing guarantees or offering concessional loans, where this de-risking mechanism improves the overall risk returns profile of a project, making it more appealing to private investors. That means, so when the investors they're trying to invest, they need a return as well as they need a safety of for their investments. So that means there must, if there is a less risk, so then they can able to invest more. So this will be bridged by the blended finance. By doing so, so the blended finance not only catalyze significant private capital flows, but also helps to lower the cost of capital. So that is the most important. So there is a capital, but investing capital, the cost of, if there is a cost of capital is increases, so then the returns will be much lesser. So that's why. So the blended finance will help us to lower the cost of capital for early stage climate projects. So which will accelerate the development and implementation in the critical emerging markets. Like, so the capital is the most important thing. So I'll tell you a lot of case studies which are done on this blended finance. So in the later part, so that means, so I guess if I understood that the blended finance, it will catalyze the significant private capital flows, but also helps the lower cost of capital for early stage climate projects. So that means, so we try to bridge the gap between the public investments as well as the private investments, which with the clear cut influences, which can also influence us on the sustainable development with the de-risk. So this is a blended finance. When it comes to the blended finance mechanism, there are three ways of you can finance. Number one is the debt investments. So where we can by providing accessible loans at a lower interest rates through concessional finance to improve the project viability and reduce the cost of capital for climate projects. Like there are climate project means for reducing carbon emission as well as using renewable energy, improving or producing a production of renewable energy resources. So for that, there is a provision of lower interest of invest loans are very important. So if you give a lot of loans at a lower rate, so then you can able to improve the or you can keep on increase the utilization of renewable resources. So that's the first one. And the second one is the equity financing. So where you can take finance equity finance, which will attract private equity investments by offering blended capital that shares risk and enhance returns and ensuring that sustainable projects can compete in the markets. So there are like for example, I can take away different examples. Like nowadays there is a called solar power projects. So that is also comes under the equity financing. So the companies are ready to invest in those companies where they are going to take up the renewable energy resource related production process. So that is the second one. And the third one is the guarantees and risk mitigation. So that means the utilizing guarantees to protect investors against the losses. That means the government, the public sector will ensure that they will protect the investors' losses and thereby lowering their risk, so appetite, and incentivizing them to participate in the climate resilient projects. So that means government will ensure that if you are going to invest in any sustainable project, so if there is any loss, so the government is going to give a guarantee for their investments. So that is a kind of mechanism that has been brought under not only the government but international institutions like IFSC, International Finance Corporation. I tell you in the later stage, International Financial Corporation and World Bank and the ADB, Asian Development Bank. So these are the major international institutions that they are guaranteeing the investments of the private investors. So this is a mechanism. So number one is the debt investments, and number two is equity financing. Number three is guarantees and risk mitigation. So, and the third one is how you can measure the impact. So, that measuring the impact of blended finance is number one is economic growth. So, assessing how blended finance contributes to the economic growth by creating jobs and promoting sustainable industries and improving infrastructural resilience. So that means, so if you are having a blended finance, so there must be some kind of creation of jobs, and so the sustainable industries will also grow and improving infrastructure resilience. I can give one best example. So today, India's EV market, I can give you best example. EV market in case of automobile, so there is a huge opportunities. You can see that. So in case of two-wheeler industries, it may be two-wheeler industries or it may be four-wheeler industries. So I guess so there will be a blend of job opportunities in these areas. So like that. So the next one is the environmental outcomes. So the evaluating the ecological benefits of climate resilience infrastructure projects through reduced emissions and biodiversity conservations and enhanced adaptation to climate change. This is the second impact that can be gained from blended finance. I can give best example of metro. I think most of the metro cities now they are coming up with the metro trains where it could able to reduce the carbon footprints. The other one is in a metro cities like Bangalore. In Bangalore, you can able to see that Janaram project funded by the central government, where it has provided 1,000 buses in city Bangalore city which is run through the renewable resources like EVs through. So this will helps the help us to reduce the emissions, and at the same time we can conserve the biodiversity also, and it will enhance the adaptation to the climate change. And the another major thing is that it is also is having social benefits. So understanding how these projects will improve the community well-being and access to service and resilience in vulnerable population, leading to a more equitable development. That means, so if you are having a good blended financing facilities, it will invest in the if they are going to invest in the sustainable projects like as I said EV. I think in most of the villages nowadays they are using electrical vehicle and solar based power pump sets for their irrigation purposes. That means so everybody can able to access the kind of all kind of facilities like solar power lamps. So these kind of things will help the marginalized people to access all kind of facilities. So ultimately, it leads to equitable development. So these are the major three impacts that can be observed through blended finance. And the next one is what are the best practices for implementation? So if you want to implement blended finance in case of sustainable development, so number one is stakeholders engagement. So how you can carry out the stakeholder engagement is that the effective collaboration among governments and development banks and NGOs and the private sector is essential for identifying needs and setting the goals and development projects that serve the community. That means the government will provide you the guarantee, and the private investors will give you the investments, and the industries will produce a kind of a product that is more sustainable oriented product. But if the stakeholders are not able to involve in this process, the project won't be get successful. That means, so the engagement of stakeholders is very important. I can give one of the best example, like Swachh Bharat Mission. I think I might be knowing that. So Swachh Bharat Mission, one of the major projects that was carried out after non-India, non-UPA government like India. So today we could able to see the some of the cities or municipalities, they could able to collect the wastage from different houses, but whenever they try to make the awareness of segregating the waste, the people, the stakeholders, they could not able to involve into it. But making them aware about the segregation of the waste, like wet waste and dry waste. So that is the most important thing. So that in that the NGO, the role of NGOs plays one of the major important. So I can tell you one best example in Karnataka. Now they have started that the involvement of NGOs in segregation of waste. That means that is also kind of the where you going to involve the people only into the making the awareness of this kind of segregation of waste. That's the most important. That means, so when you are going to have a blended finance, there is a need for a stakeholders engagement. Unless they are not going to engage into the this project, it won't be successful. And the number two is capacity building. So that means you have to provide the training and support to the local institution and management teams to enhance their ability to implement climate resilient infrastructure projects successfully. That means, so without in training and skill development, so it's very difficult to implement the blended finance. And the number three is monitoring and evaluation. That is the most important thing. So unless you're going to monitor the evaluate what exactly is happening the after implementation of the sustainable oriented project, so we can't able to see the what is the whether it is successful or not. So that means establishing a robust monitoring framework to evaluate the impact of blended finance project and ensuring transparency is very important. That means, so how the project has been implemented very transparently, and accountability is very important. So how much money has been spent, how much the money has been gone to the different environmental oriented such as sustainable oriented projects, and whether is there in continuous improvement or not. As I said in one of the best example, Japan has introduced metro, I think in the 70s, 80s itself. But now we are implementing metro kind of rail projects in India. But whether it is enhancing the environmental sustainability, or whether it is whether it will be very helpful for the people to travel and reduce traffic, and whether is there any improvement over it. So that means, so monitoring is very important. Monitoring and evaluation is very one of the major thing that has to be carried out by the government on on project basis. So these are the three major best practices for the implementation of a blended finance. And next one is, so the climate investment gap in emerging market is very important. So emerging economies stand a critical juncture, facing the both the disappropriate, proportionate impact of climate change and the challenge of securing adequate finance. So that is the most important things that we are emerging economies are facing. So despite contributing two-thirds of global emission, these regions often lack the financial resources to build the necessary climate resilient infrastructure. I think I can tell you one of the best example. Like still we are lagging in the solar energy production, but we need a lot of financing for that. So as per the data from United Nations Environmental Program, which estimates that the annual investment need of $187 billion to $359 billion for the climate infrastructure in these markets. So the other one is the rising national debt levels and increasing borrowing costs further constrain government and make it difficult to allocate sufficient funds, public funds. So these are they're still having a lot of obstacles for increasing investments. So this widening gap underscores the urgent need for innovative financing and solution to protect vulnerable population and drive sustainable development. So that means, so especially the emerging economies are still they are facing the investments in sustainable development areas. So so why do we need to have a private capital? So the private capital is a key, but challenge to mobilize. That is the most important thing. So I can give one of the best example. I think in Bangalore recently, what happened? So the metro uh, from Bommanalli to one metro recently inaugurated. So that station was developed by the uh, software companies. That means so
ನಾನು
the
ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ,
mobilization.
ಇನ್ನೂ ಲೇಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಯಾರು ಮಾತಾಡ್ಕೊಂತೀರಾ?
Hello.
ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ, ಯಾರು ಮಾತಾಡ್ಕೋಬೋದು ತಾನೆ? ಏನ್
Hello.
ಪರವಾಗಿಲ್ಲ.
Hello sir.
ನೀವು ನಾವು ಎಲ್ಲ ಕೊಡ್ತೀವಿ.
Hello, Munira sir,
ನಾನು
can you
ಅಲ್ಲಿರಲ್ಲ,
unmute please?
ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಬರಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ.
Hello.
ESC ರೂಮ್ ಇವಾಗ ನಮ್ದು ಇಲ್ಲಲ್ಲ, ಅಲ್ಲ.
Thank you. Private investment is one of the key because, as I said, one of the metro rail that was inaugurated in Bangalore that was funded by the philanthropists like different IT companies. So that means so we need to have philanthropists as well as private capital. So to improve the sustainable development oriented project. So the private sector, that means the private sector holds a trillion in capital, a vast resources essential for closing the climate investment gap. However, mobilizing this capital for climate resilient infrastructure in emerging markets present is a significant challenge. So investors often perceive these markets as a high risk due to political instability and regular uncertainty and currency fluctuation. So which are leading to unattractive risk returns. I think these are one of the some of the political as well as economic factors that has making one of the challenges for capital investments in sustainable development areas. So furthermore, the lack of standardization, that is the most important thing. In blended finance, deals uh, creates a complexity and deter investments. So we have to make the standardization of a blended finance is very important. With the over 200 different bespoke blended finance structure currently in use, the absence of uniformity results in a low liquidity and a higher transaction cost and making it difficult for private investors to deploy capital at scale. So that means that the standardization of the blended finance is very important in emerging economies. So if you can see this data, the source of financing to climate blended finance transition from 2017 to 2022. So there are different way of sourcing source of financing. Let's say, for example, you can see that. So others public sector financing like at market rate. So their proportion is much higher, and private sector financing at market rate that is also much higher. When it compares to ODA, ODA means official development assistance from international institutions like World Bank and like IMF and IFC. So these are the institutions that they're going to find. So the direct financing institution, like they're going to give a financial assistance to the developing countries, especially underdeveloped countries, to improve their sustainable development projects. And the other one is non-ODA. So that means those are not getting the development assistance, so those countries have been much lesser. So when it compares to these five sources of funding, so the public sector financing and private sector financing share are much more wider, much more when it compares to others. If you can see that data from 2017, so there was around $1,653 million which were received from public sector financing, and the major share is from private sector finance. That is $2,774 million from private sector. So this was the situation in 2007. When it comes to the 2022, so I think you can see that there is a reduction in the public sector financing. It has came down to now it is $308 billion. But when it comes to the private sector, also it has decreased in 2022. But in case of ODA and the DFI, so the funding has been increased. This is a fluctuation which is happening from 2017 to 2022. These are the major sources of financing to climate blended finance transaction. So in different countries, especially in emerging economies. So when it comes to the real world impact, so as I said, the International Finance Corporation stands as a testament to the power of blended finance. Since 2010, the IFC has strategically deployed 4.6 billion dollar in the concessional funds. which have played a crucial role in supporting 457 projects across more than 90 countries. That means, as I said, the international institution like IFC, International Finance Corporation, so they are doing really well. So this targeted deployment has really impressive results with the every $1 of blended finance, which mobilizing an average of $7 in private capital. That means they are guaranteeing. So even international institution also guaranteeing the private capital. So there is an increase in the private capital. So this significant leverage ratio demonstrates how public funds can unlock substantial private investment. So furthermore, the success of these projects creates a powerful demonstration effect. As you know that, so demonstration effect showcasing the viable investment model that subsequently lower the perceived risk and cost for future climate resilient initiatives. So which are encouraging even broader private sector participation. That means, so if any government or if any international institution is giving guarantee, so which is influencing the private investors to invest more, so that creates a lot of demonstration effect. So the next one is the need for standardization and scaling. So how do you standardize and make the scaling of blended finance is that, so it is truly to achieve its potential to unlock trillions of dollars of climate action. It must transition from bespoke and one-off deals to standardized scalable instruments. The capital markets thrive on uniformity, as seen with the $5 trillion green bond market, where standardization products facilitate liquidity and broader investment participation. The current fragmented landscape of over 200 different blended finance structure creates inefficiency and deter mainstream investors. Learning from these historical precedents like Brady bonds, which transformed the emerging market debt into tradable securities, and blended finance needs to align stakeholders' interests to create uniform tradable products. That means, so there were also there are a lot of what do you call the deficiencies in framing the standardization of scale for blended finance, but still they could able to make some of the tradable securities and blended financing. Stakeholders can take off the uniform tradable products. So this can be classified into three ways: blended standardization scale, so that there is a shift will enable institutional investors to engage more easily and drive vulnerable necessary to meet the vast climate investment. These are the major three standardization scale. That is, number one is efficiency, number two is accessibility, number three is liquidity. So for the blended finance standardization, number one is, as I said, efficiency. Efficiency means what here? The efficiency means the streamlining the process and reduce the transaction cost. So if the private investors want to invest or reduce their capital cost, so there must be you have to make the streamline of the process. You have to make it as simple as it is, so that there will be a reduction in the transaction cost. So if you reduce the transaction cost, obviously there is a reduction in the capital cost, so that the people can that private people can invest in climate investments projects. Number three is accessibility. Accessibility means how you can able to attract the wider range of institutional investors. That means how you are going to make the environmental friendly, how you can make the ease of doing the business. So this kind of accessibility, if you provide, so then there is a lot of investments from the private capitals for private investors. And number three is liquidity. So liquidity will enable easier to trading and valuation of instruments. So how you could able to liquidate the investments so that it can be easily make the trading process. So these are the major three scaling and standardization under blended finance. Number one is efficiency, number two is accessibility, number three is liquidity. Okay, so when we move on to the another major concept is that, so the emerging innovations in blended finance instruments. And how you going to bring out the innovations? That's the most important thing. So the landscape of blended finance is continually evolving with a new instruments designed to meet diverse investments needs and risk aptitude. So in that, the sustainability linked bonds, that's the most important thing. So how you can able to bring out the sustainability with the linked bonds and labeled green bonds are gaining attraction and providing long-term and transparent financing avenues directly to environmental performance matrices. That means, so if you're going to bring out, if you're going to link the sustainability with the green label bonds, so that you can able to bring a lot of improvement in the environmental performance matrices. So beyond traditional debt instruments, the public-private and philanthropic partnership that are very important. As I said, we must be knowing that PPPEP. Here we can say that PPPP triple four P. Public-private philanthropic partnership. That is the most important. I think I might be have heard of public-private partnership in building roads and all. But here in a sustainable development project, we need three major players. One is public as well as private, and philanthropic are very important. They play a crucial. As I said, it's a acupuncture points to unlock institutional investments, and particularly in the area requiring significant de-risking or policy support. So these are the three major players play a major role in blended finance. The philanthropic capital, in particular, is play an increasingly catalytic role not only by providing first-class tranches and guarantees, but also through crucial policy advocacy and technical assistance, paving the way for larger private investments. That means how much you can able to do philanthropic funding to the sustainable development. That will be more for the enhancement of sustainable development in emerging economies. And the next one is the overcoming barriers. How you can come out of from the obstacles which are facing in emerging economies. Uh, Number one is to truly scale blended finance, a systematic barrier must be addressed through policy and market intervention. A crucial step is strengthening climate information architecture. So that means, so you have to make a proper architecture of make the information you have to provide. So information is the key. So which involves the development of consistent data standards and clear taxonomies for green asset and transparent disclosure requirements. That means if you're going to make any kind of investments, that should be the data should be clear, proper standardized. You have to make the standardization of data. I can give one of the best example. So I think you must be knowing that in solar energy production, I think Karnataka, I think Gujarat, they are doing really well. In Karnataka, we call it as Pavagada. So the place is called Pavagada. So earlier it was a very underdeveloped area, but now today I think the development in these areas improving because of the solar power generation. So that means if you want to give a proper area, because the reason is that the temperature in Pavagada in during summer season, which are much more higher when it compares to the other areas, and you can have a plain land. So when it comes to the other area, so that means so you have to give proper information about your area. What is actually happening? How much the taxonomy is high is there in different areas? How we can able to convert those areas into sustainable areas? So that's the most important thing here. That means information is the key. So for investing in sustainable area projects. And number three is that government must implement clear climate policies, including effective carbon pricing mechanism. So that means so how we could able to uh, bring out the carbon pricing mechanism. That is the most important thing to have a look at the. Well, you can look at the one example for EV vehicle production. So earlier the government was giving a subsidy those who are using the electric vehicle. So those are if they are using a polluting vehicle, so government has to impose a more kind of tax. If you're emitting more carbon, that means you have to pay more tax. So that kind of mechanism they have to bring in into it, so that they could able to invest more in the in kind of like electrically run vehicles. Okay, so the next one is additionally you have to build a robust local currency bond market in emerging economies. It's vital to mitigate foreign exchange risk and attract local institutional investors. I think nowadays you might be heard of like LC. LC means local currency market, LCM. Usually we call it as LCM. So you have to bring it a local currency market. If you are going to bring a local currency market in international trade, so that there won't be any kind of fluctuation in the foreign. You can avoid the fluctuations in the foreign exchange rates. So that you can able to invest more, and your returns will be stable and your investment will be stable, so that you can attract more institutional investors. So I think recently India has having the local currency market with Russia as well as UAE. So I think India is gradually increasing the local currency market network with the neighbor countries and rest of the world. So finally, what I could say that enhancing the capacity of these local institutions to assess and invest in the climate project will further accelerate capital mobilization. That means, so how you could able to enhance the capacity. Capacity means how you can absorb those capital investments which are made by the privates. So and how you can utilize those money in a green projects. So that's the most important thing. So that will make the policy. It depends on the policy how we can make out the absorption of capacity of using the investments. And apart from that, so there are three other major things that we need to take care of while focusing on blended finance and climate resilient infrastructure. Number one is data and disclosure. As I said, so how good you are having the climate data, and the reporting standards should be very good, so that you can able to get the how whether we are improving or not. So that aspect can also be taken care of. And number three is policy framework. And that means you have to implement a clear-cut policy, so that there should not be any ambiguity at all. So, and at the same time, local market development is very important to strengthen the local bond market and investors' capacity. So, this in a nutshell, we can say that. So, to overcome the barriers of not getting blended finance, we need to improve three things. One is data and disclosure. Number two is policy frameworks. Number three is local development. So, these are the major things. So, and when it comes to the case studies, as I said in the earlier stage itself, so there are countries which have been benefited from the blended blended finance. So, I can give one of the best example I can give is that in Rwanda, the blended finance has been instrumental in developing solar energy projects, aligning with the country's national determined contributions for emission reductions. So that is one of the best example I can give. And the number two is that Indonesia has leveraged these mechanisms for large scale conservation efforts and geothermal energy development. So especially in Indonesia, so they could able to conserve, make the conservation of energy, geothermal energy. It was one of the best investment that I can say. The Climate Investors Fund. So they have created one of the in an international level. They have created Climate Investors Fund with the $850 million with a multi-tier blended finance fund is a promising example successful in de-risking and accelerating renewable energy projects across the various emerging markets. So another notable success is that IFC, I think International Finance Corporation, they come up with the amenity structure fund, which demonstrated that impressive ability to attract 16 times more private investments compared to traditional funding approach. That means, so International Finance Corporation putting a lot of effort to increase the investments in emerging economies through different modes, which showcase the immense potential when the structure are optimized for private capital. So that means, so I think these are some of the major case study here I'm telling. One is Rwanda, number two is Indonesia, and the IFC. The role of IFC was very important in increasing the blended finance in climate resilience. So, and the next one is in case of India, if I can tell you that the blended finance is doing a lot of good work in the area of renewable energy. So there is a lot of investment in solar energy projects which boost the renewable energy. Like I can say, it may be thermal, it may be what do you call solar energy, it may be wind energy. So there is a lot of investments coming into these energy sectors in India. So when it comes to the Africa, so African people they could able to get the blended finance in the area of water infrastructure. So they could able to come up with the innovative financing in the water supply and sanitation. So that is also most important thing for sustainable development. So if you're not able to improve the sanitation and water supply for hygiene water supply to the needy people, so then there is a kind of sustainable development you can able to achieve. So number three major case study that we can see here is that so the Caribbean, the disaster resilient housing in Caribbean. So in Caribbean, so they could be able to bring the blended finance in the area of this disaster management. So the blended finance goes to the contribution of climate resilience home. So we can able to build homes, sustainable homes. That is also one of the best things that can also be done through blended finance. So these are the major case studies which are successful through blended finance, especially in case I think you might be heard of the renewable energy in India. I think after China, so India is one of the like booming sector in renewable energy sources. So when you take up the even India is also exporting some of the renewable energy instruments to the rest of the world. So and and when it comes to the with the data, if I can tell you, the blended finance market in India has been growing steadily with the USD dollar of 5.6 million has been deployed across 180 transactions between 2010 to 2022. So if you can take the annual average of annual investment in terms of million, so in 2010, it was 139 million, but which has increased at a CAGR, compound annual growth rate of about 19%. Now it is around, it has increased to 1,115 million dollar. So I think you can see here that there are different bilateral agency at international foundations are active in developing or funding the blended finance. So I can say UNSAD and Michael and UBS, British Asian Trust, British International Investments. This is the international funding agency that they are funding for under the blended finance. And in case of our Indian banks, private banks, NBFCs, and banks are prominent in private investors like Industrial Bank and Yes Bank and Caspian Bank and Sumati. And these are the financing areas, banks that are doing very well in under blended finance for sustainable development. And when it comes to the what is the market size, the blended finance market size by different sectors, if you can say that, we can see that. So there are sectors like in the total market size by in terms of value. For climate action, there are 4%. Education is 6%. For wash is 9%. Health for 9%, and energy is 12%. And for agriculture is 15%, and livelihood is um, 19%, and financial services 23%. And overall, if you can see that, so there are almost all the sector which are comes under blended finance market, they're all related to sustainable development. And when you take the in terms of value, you can take highest value is considered by the energy and finance. I think almost all of us are aware of that. So the carbon emission which are highly influenced by the energy consumption. So I think energy sector yeah, focused more as well as the financial sector, financial service when it compares to other sectors. So which are comes under the blended financial market in India. So to conclude, urgency of climate change demand immediate and decisive action, and blended finance offers a powerful solution to bridge the investment gap. That means, so as I said, there is a need for the participation of both public sector, private sector, and as well as the philanthropic investments. These are the three PPP are very important for the major solution for the investment gaps in emerging economies. So number two is to unlock the trillion required for climate resilience infrastructure. We must prioritize, as I said, standardization. You have to make the how uniformity you can make the investments, how you're going to make the uniformity of returns, and how you're going to uniformity in accountability, transparency. So these are the most important things that has to be standardized. And the next one is you have to foster the greater transparency. So higher the transparency, higher the investments. So that's a major thing that we have to take care of. And number two is ensure strong stakeholder alignment. So that means the stakeholders are very important in between blended finance as well as climate change resilience across public, private, and philanthropic sectors. But strategically, we need to deploying the catalytic capital to these risk investments. We can effectively crowding in the vast potential of the private sectors. So that means we have to encourage the private people to invest in green energy or green energy or green oriented environmental oriented development process. Together, these efforts can transform emerging economies, climate resilience, and accelerate our collective journey towards achieving global net zero goals. As I think almost all of us know that. So when there is international conference on environment, they used to always they focus on the zero carbon emission targets. So I think most of the emerging economies they need to focus on zero carbon emission targets. So in order to achieve that, so each emerging economies has to focus on the major three players, the public, private, and philanthropic sectors. So uh, this is a time to act now. So let us supercharge blended finance for the sustainable future for all of us. So these are the major things that has been come under the blended finance. So if you're going to improve the blended finance, so there is a development or a sustainable development in the emerging economies. So these are the my viewpoints related to this session. If you have any doubts and clarification, you can feel free to ask.